the pickled quail egg. You remember it well, don't you?
Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it.
You said he was a good cook.
I had nothing to do with cooking that one. Pulled it right out of a jar. Yeah, Rachel's gag in that moment, I think, is 100% real.
Why did we even come here?
Because he left you everything such as it is. You have to mean something to him, right?
What are you doing here?
A visitor. We're visiting.
You don't know the tales.
What tales?
Hello, Miles. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks. Nice to speak to you.
Very nice to speak to you.
How are you?
I'm fine. It's fantastic to believe that you managed to pull all of this off. And I know it was, Rachel, I know it was your first pandemic movie, no? Was that the same for you, Miles? What was the first thing that you got into after the pandemic struck?
Yes, it was. I think it was the first thing. Well, I had done one acting gig
Right.
during the pandemic on a Morgan Freeman, Ruby Rose film called.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, with Ruby Rose. Yeah, I know which one you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, this was certainly the first film I had directed during the pandemic, and I believe it was Rachel's first.
Yeah, it was the first time
Sorry.
I felt comfortable going back to work, especially because there were a number of things. I liked the script, obviously, but also I was very interested in the accommodations and what they were going to be, because that was very important for me. If I'm getting on a flight, my first flight, and then I'm flying there. And so we all lived and shot on the same campus. And for me, that made me just settle down and feel like it was okay.
I mean, because it's a kind of an independent movie, that must have been quite daunting to kind of go into an independent movie and know that you've got to kind of stick to protocol, know, and make sure everything's right, keep all your actors. That's kind of it's an added kind of cost for you, as well. No, it's a big thing for an independent movie, no?
It's daunting. It was daunting both on a logistical level and a budget level. Certainly on an independent film budget, as you say. But we knew it was something. Basically, we want to shoot the movie. We have to make this happen. So we were testing 3-4 times a week. We had sanitation protocols. When we would have scenes indoors, we would have to run HEPA filters up until we were ready to shoot. And of course, I think Rachel is exactly right in that being able to sequester on a single campus at Little Black Creek Campground and Park in Lumberton, Mississippi, where we shot, that was enormous for us.
Yeah.
So we had a very small handful of people that ever left the campus, and when they did, they would have to test before returning to campus. But basically our entire cast, certainly our principal cast, the people that were on the whole show, never left. Rachel never left. I never left. Lindsay, who's my partner in life and art, who is also a producer and the costume designer, played a role. She never left. So the DP never left. So sort of the core people were there the whole time. And after a while, it sort of began to feel like familial, almost like film camp. And I think we felt like, in some respects, we were a heck of a lot safer in our little film bubble than if we were out in the outside world,
Yeah, and I would agree with that entirely, because I had my own little cabin. I did steal Miles and Lindsay's dog Callie on many an occasion because I was missing my puppy. But that was the thing. They were gracious enough to organize. I had people that would shop for groceries for me, anything I needed, anything I wanted. I still wear the pajamas that were in my gift basket because they were so comfy. But I got treated so well, better than on like $200 million sets, and everybody stayed healthy. We never had a negative test or a positive test the entire time we were there.
Brilliant. And then at the same time, the fact that you were filming during the pandemic must have kind of helped and really kind of played into the themes of the film, because the way that you are kind of out there in the middle of this forest and you really don't know what's going on, even though you have lived there before, that must have really kind of helped as well in a way, no?
Just another one of Grandpa's scary stories told after too much whiskey.
The winter solstice comes, the great hunt has begun. With arrow, sword, and knives, the supreme hunter consumes his lives.
Okay, I don't believe it. Any of it.
The prey never believes until your skin hangs on his wall.
I think it sort of added to the milieu and the vibe that we were trying to create. And I also think being sequestered and isolated like that, and being all together in the same place, I mean, we could basically walk to each other's cabins and talk about scenes or what we were doing the next day or whatnot. Also created an intimacy among the cast and the crew that I think is rare, you know, on a lot of films, but especially on an independent film, where it's just go, 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 go. And, you know, hopefully you get to see your cast when, you know, a few minutes before you shoot the scene, or maybe have a quick phone call. But, you know, we actually got to have discussions over dinner and that sort of thing. And that was, it really was, as harrowing as it was, it was also, I think, a net positive for the film.
Brilliant.
I would completely agree, just because. Oh no, this is all right. First of all, because given the situation, I met Johans over Zoom before we even got to Mississippi. So we were able to establish a kind of chemistry, which was really, really nice. And then, yeah, it doesn't hurt that Miles and Lindsay are great cooks. So you want them to come to your cabin and make you some food and share some wine, maybe occasional whiskey. It was kind of perfect. And I didn't want to leave. I was in utopia. It was perfect.
It doesn't look like it in the film, so wow, you did a good job. Brilliant. So I want to go back to the actual seed of the film, because obviously I know that you really, I mean, because you've studied ancient history now and things like this, you like to kind of imbue these things into your films now in a big way, and you can definitely feel that here. But I'm really interested, why this kind of I don't know how you pronounce it properly, excuse me, the Cernunnos myth, no? Yeah. What was it about this specific myth that kind of really enticed you to kind of write a screenplay about this specific myth and set it where you set it?
Yeah, so Cernunnos is a vegetation deity, a nature deity, and we definitely wanted to go with a nature cult, which boils down our options a little bit. But Cernunnos has roots in Roman Gaul and Germany, and his name is cognatic with the Germanic god of the wild hunt, Herne. So we also knew we wanted to be in Germany in the Black Forest. And that was partially because I have a little bit of German. I had studied German at the Goethe Institute in Munich as part of my graduate degree when I was getting my PhD in ancient history. And I did the mythos of the Black Forest is so great. I mean, there's so many legends of ghosts and goblins and forest people and wild hunts and all this stuff. It's just it's a playground that is rife with creative possibility. But with regard to Cernunnos in particular, these vegetation deities they're vicious, you know, they're nasty. They are the guardians of the natural realm and of the land and of the crops and the beasts of the field, which of course human beings depend on for their very survival. But when you cross them, it's bad news for you. I mean, look at someone like Dionysus. He will happily turn you into a tree or a vine or God knows what else and murder your entire family. Cernunnos is typically a bit more benevolent than that. So we pushed him in a bit more of a sinister direction. But at the same time, we wanted to sort of poke and prod a little bit at this question of man's relationship to nature. Right. And maybe this deity and this cult are doing what they think they must do in light of human beings' tendency to damage and destroy nature. And so we wanted the audience to have to wrestle with that to some degree.
I mean, you mentioned there that you had to speak German. I mean, obviously you've learned it, but I don't know how fluent you are in German. That must have been quite daunting for you. And then at the same time, Rachel, you having to work, because pretty much almost half of the script is in German. There's quite a lot of scenes there in German. So it must have been quite daunting for the two of you, in that sense.
I'm going to say that thankfully my character did not have to speak perfect German when I'm in the forest with Rachel, because I was terrible at it. I can speak Spanish, I can speak French.
You can speak Spanish, yeah. I think I remember you speaking a bit Spanish, yeah.
But German was definitely difficult. But at the same time, it lends very well to the script, how the story plays out. And Miles is obviously much better. I mean, Lindsay was incredible. All the stuff that she had to say, I couldn't even fathom myself. And Elena, who was also the actress in the movie, but she was the one that was set on fire. She's also German, so she could help all of us. But it was a group effort.
Yeah, Elena was a real MVP in this regard. We knew having a film that's, as you say, probably 40% or so in German was going to be a difficult task. But we had a German dialect coach, Oliver Hoffer, out of New York City, who ultimately was not able to travel to our set because of the pandemic. But then Elena, who is fluent in German, who wound up playing a larger role as the result of a shakeup in the cast, because we had an actor fly in, test positive for COVID before reporting to set. So the protocols worked, and that was an absolutely terrifying moment.
The protocols worked.
But that debacle ultimately resulted in Elena being elevated into the role of Latara from a smaller role. And since she was there the whole time and fluent in German, she was like, hey, I'm not doing anything. Let me just come, even if I'm not in the scene, come and listen to your dialect. I'll listen to the German. I can give you some advice if about the language. And then of course, as Rachel pointed out, and we set her on fire for her trouble. So she was really a trooper. We were very grateful to have Elena Sanchez on the show. And
then Rachel, I'd like to speak a little bit about the relationship. I mean, you said that you got a chance to speak with your partner in the film kind of beforehand, over Skype, and you got to know him and built a bit of a relationship there, no? What specific kind of relationship were you looking for there? Because it felt like you were going for a very specific relationship there in terms of, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but obviously you're called the little bird in the film and he's kind of lion. What was the kind of relationship that you and Miles, you're trying to create there before everything kind of happens in the film?
For me, when you're building a relationship that you're building in basically the blink of an eye, and you're looking for authenticity and you're looking for realism, and speaking with Johannes before helped it, because I needed him to be the love of my life. I needed him to mean so much to me, and the fact that he was going to take this journey with me and we were going to go to this house that we probably should have declined the inheritance. But I needed that bond, that he wasn't only my husband, but he was my best friend, and I trusted him. And to build that, and we were both very honest about it, and Miles obviously contributed, but we had to just work at it. It needed to be authentic, because there's nothing worse than seeing a very in love married couple with zero chemistry on screen, because then you just aren't interested at all. And Johannes was so lovely. We wanted to, I think trust was our biggest thing that we wanted to build, the trust between the two of us, and believing in each other and our family. And there were discussions about children and all of that. So it was obviously that we had gone through some difficulties, but had come out on the other side before we go to get this house. And we really wanted to build that kind of love. And I think we did a pretty good job.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Because the relationship you have, I mean, without giving too much away, it's as though Johannes is really, he will sacrifice, even though he doesn't really know what's happened to you in the past. he will literally sacrifice anything, as soon as he hears a noise, he'll pick up a spade and go and see what's going on. It's like he'll literally sacrifice everything for you, even though he doesn't really know what's going on. I mean, imagine that was Miles, that was very much what you were going for from the word go, no?
One of the things that he said, sorry, Miles, just one of the things he said was, I want you to be my end all be all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we played.
Yeah, and that comes through on screen, no question about it. The other thing I have to say both about Johannes and Rachel as performers is they're very warm, they're very open, and they're very engaged with their scene partners and with their director. They also, both of them have a slight goofy streak, which is really great because they're willing to look a little silly if need be, or try something outside the box. And it just works beautifully. And there are a couple of moments in the film where they share a laugh or a giggle, or there are a couple of improvised moments with them in bed that they're just playing with each other. They're just goofing around. And as married couples do, as people in long-term relationships do, and it reads beautifully. But yeah, it really had to seem like Johannes, he was on this journey from, beginning till the bitter end, despite the fact that, as you say, he has no idea what the hell is going on here. He's sort of, putting the pieces together as he goes along. And yet this is something that Robin feels compelled to do for some reason, or this is important to her for some reason. And so he's right there with her, and he's like, baby, if this is what you got to do, I'm right there with you. And I'm going to make sure that nothing happens to you, at least to the best of my ability. Yeah.
It's one of the things that my parents always said that I grew up with, and they're in their 70s now. Couples always hold hands. Couples always hold hands. And that was another thing. I was like, couples always hold hands. And his character was there to hold my hand, not knowing what he was diving into, but definitely ready to dive into anything with me, because couples always hold hands.
Yeah, well, you see when right when they arrive at the cabin, and Rachel's character is kind of woozy and leans onto the stairwell, and Johannes immediately runs around the car and is there to embrace her and to hold her. And in another moment where something gory and horrific is revealed, Johannes is right there, and he's got a hand on her shoulder, hand on her arm, rubbing her, letting her know, hey, I'm physically present, I'm here with you. And that's the actors, finding it, I mean, I'm not saying, Johannes, put your hand on her shoulder. I mean, we build the relationship, we build the characters, and then they take it from there.
Just flowed now, yeah. Brilliant. And then, I mean, you mentioned that you got some gory scenes, obviously. When it comes to that, obviously, this is a pretty horrific situation. We're talking about things that happen in the wild, hunting. I mean, when people go hunting, they do pretty horrific things to animals anyway. So what was the kind of line that you wanted to draw there when it came to in terms of showing how much gore you show on there? Because it does kind of want to portray what hunting involves as well at the same time, no?
Yeah, I wanted to choose my battles in that regard. I wanted to have a handful of really horrific, gory moments, but I also didn't want to make the film so gory and so squirm worthy that, people who are averse to gore wouldn't want to watch it.
Yeah.
And also, may I just say, you also didn't want to take away from the other elements of the story by making it too. You wanted to include all these other bits, and so you had to. But I just wanted to emphasize that, because other interviews that I've had are very grateful for that, because there wasn't so much gore that they couldn't see into the other elements.
Right.
So just,
right.
No gratuitous gore, yeah.
It's but like the in the flash presence and the scene of Rachel eating the deer eyeball. I mean, those stories of initiation, as gruesome as they are, the pickled quail egg. You remember it well, don't you?
Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it.
You said he was a good cook.
I had nothing to do with cooking that one. Pulled it right out of a jar. Yeah, Rachel's gag in that moment, I think, is 100% real. But these things,
it was worse than the vomit.
I grew up in the deep South, deep American South, right? And so deer hunting is a big deal where I grew up. Now, I never did it myself, but I literally had friends that I went to school with that, they kill their first deer and they're like eating the entrails and smearing blood on their faces and all. Like, that stuff is very real across a great many cultures.
I grew up in Maine. I grew up with a father who hunted every year, still hunts at 75. We always joke that it was, it was Thanksgiving when there was a deer hanging by its hind legs in my garage. So I'm totally familiar with hunting culture. Eating an eyeball, not so much.
That's a bit different.
I wanted the gore to be, I wanted it to be effective and visceral and story driven. And for me, that's where gore goes off the rails a little bit when it's just gratuitous. I mean, I guess it's true with anything. I mean, nudity but I mean, as long as it's story driven and it feels like it's serving the narrative that you're trying to tell, and it's true to the characters that inhabit that narrative, then I'm all for it, But when it just feels gratuitous and in your face, and in fact, as Rachel was pointing out, it's actually taking away from the story you're trying to tell, then for me, that's too far.
Mm-hmm. And I'm on the same page as that. Anything, whether it be gore or nudity or any, it takes away, if it's taking away from the story just for a gratuitous or disgusting purpose, it's taking away from the story, which at the end of the day is the last thing that you want to do.
Right.
And it's something that you have to collaborate with, and Miles is a great collaborator, and I knew I had to eat that deviled pickled egg, the hot sauce. I knew
that was part of the story. You needed to do that.
Part of the story.
Well, it's a traumatic. I mean, the trauma of that for a young girl, right?
I'm still traumatized.
Right. And that's a generational trauma, and the complications and dangers and neuroses that are created by expectation, the expectation of parents or grandparents and lineage. This is a big theme in the film, and that moment is, I mean, that's just a critical event, right, in Robin's trajectory. So we knew we had to do it, and we knew we wanted adult Rachel in those scenes because she's living out those moments right now. So that's why we didn't cast a young girl to play Rachel. We wanted it to feel like she was experiencing that again in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did experience it. Oh, I did.
Yeah. Very first hand, yeah. But those things must have been quite complicated for you to kind of be your younger self, being with your grandfather at the same time now, but being your adult self at the same time, no?
I had a really good director. His name was Miles. And
Right, yeah. I heard he was a good cook as well. That's right. Yeah.
No, but it was a huge help. You have to. One of the best things I can say about Miles is he's also an actor, and for an actor as myself to have an actor be a director changes the performance always to the positive, always makes it better. Because when you have a director who's never acted and he gives you a note that's like, be a watermelon on top of a sailboat in the middle of a lake, in you get the most obtuse directions, and then they make no sense. But when you have a director who's also an actor, it changes the narrative, it changes the story. And as an actor, you have a trust in them because they trust in you that you also know what you're doing, and the way they direct you says, I know what you're doing here, just put this little seed in your brain. It's volumes different than having a director who's never acted before.
Yeah.
So thanks, Miles, for being a great actor.
Thank you for being awesome in our movie.